Hi and welcome to a video about productivity, a topic that nobody else is talking about here on YouTube. But even so, I wanted to share with you today some tips and tricks and strategies that I use in my daily life as a freelance fashion designer. And keep in mind that those tips are coming from a person who actually kind of hates a lot of the values that are commonly associated with productivity. Because when I say productivity, you probably think of the concept as doing a lot of things in the least amount of time possible. But that whole idea about doing more and more and more, faster and faster, is exactly what I hate. I think it's a very capitalist way of looking at productivity, and it's not sustainable long term, kind of like capitalism. So for me, I'm of course interested in working more efficiently, but also I'm interested in not being overwhelmed or feeling rushed about the things that I have to do. And I also want to have enough time to dedicate to the tasks that are important. So my goal with all of these strategies is first to have a nicer time when I'm working, but more importantly to leave enough space in my day to enjoy the time that I don't spend working, because the best part of life is actually living it. So for me that can mean something like spending time doing your hobbies, spending time with your partner, your friends, going outside, doing interesting things, or maybe just watching the sunset by your window. Literally anything else that you do outside of your job. And also I'm very aware of this fact that we as freelancers, or like any person that has to work for a living, we are essentially trading time, our time, for money. But in that exchange, we always end up with the bad end of the bargain, because whoever hires us, whoever is paying us, they can still get more money elsewhere, but we will never get back the time that we have spent working. So I want to do it in the best way possible, in a way that aligns with my values and my way of living. That said, let's get to work, literally, because I'm going to take you through my day with me so you can see how I apply these strategies that I'm going to talk to you about. Okay, so let's start the day, and I'm going to start my day by actually not working. And that's because I have realized that my energy when I wake up is quite high, and then it goes downhill pretty quickly after that. So whenever I try to do things after work that require a bit more concentration, I just can't. So one of my goals for this year was to learn Blender, and my original plan was to do that after work, but my brain just decided that it's not gonna happen. So I thought, if I feel more energized in the morning, why don't I do Blender before work? And that, my friends, has worked out beautifully. Every morning I put on a timer for around 30 minutes and I follow a tutorial or a course or whatever I'm doing that day, and then I start my work day. And that experiment has actually made me rethink my whole routine by trying to reorganize my days in a way that aligns with the times when I have more energy and more focus. So for me, that means that I wake up quite early and I do the things that require more brain power in the mornings, and then after lunch I try to do things that are not as intensive in terms of concentration. So for example, having calls with clients or doing Illustrator sketches, things like that. And this is something that works very well for me because of my energy levels. Like they are highest at night, because I guess I was born to be a vampire, but the next best thing for me is the mornings. So that's when I can do my best work, but it doesn't mean that for you it has to be the same. Maybe for you it's the opposite way. Maybe in the mornings you are very sleepy and then you start to actually wake up after lunch, or maybe even later in the day. So if you have the option, and I think that if you are a freelancer as I am, and probably that's because you're watching this video, you will likely have the option of rearranging your work day with a lot of freedom. That's one of the few perks that we have. It may be beneficial for you to take a look at your schedule and think about when do you feel the best and what do you want to do in that time. Because even though freelancing is our 9 to 5, it doesn't have to be a 9 to 5. It can be a 7 to 3, or it can be a 12 to whatever. So don't be afraid to experiment and reorganize your routine. And if you want to know more about this whole like energy level focus time thing, I remember reading an article a long time ago that talked about this. I don't know how scientific it was actually, but it talked about something called chronotypes, and there are like different chronotypes depending on when your energy is higher along the day, and they have cute names like the lion chronotype, the dolphin chronotype, things like that. I will leave a link to that below. Again, I'm not sure what's the scientific basis for all this, but I think it can be interesting if you want to read more about the topic. It can help you look for ways to organize your day. And of course, once you identify the times of the day when you have more energy, it doesn't mean that you have to dedicate those times exclusively to work. Like for example, I decided to take 30 minutes out of that time and dedicate it to Blender, which is something that I don't necessarily do for work. So maybe for you, you can dedicate that time to another hobby. And I have to say that starting the day doing something that makes me happy, like in this case learning Blender, learning something, it has a positive impact. Like it makes me excited when I wake up because I think, oh, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn that. So maybe that can help you if you find that waking up in the morning is like, oh, this horrible thing. Maybe having something to look forward to first thing in the day can help you with that. Now that I finished my Blender practice, it's time for me to actually start my workday, and the first thing that I do is to open my calendar. This is something that apparently, and according to all the productivity gurus, it's called calendar blocking, but I believe that that's something that we all know how to do, but maybe we haven't realized yet. The thing about calendar blocking, the theory is very simple. You go to a calendar and you block out the time that you think it's going to take you to do your tasks. There are entire videos on YouTube that explain in detail how to do this, but it's probably not rocket science, so you can just go to your calendar and do the thing that I'm going to do right now. Ideally, if you're good at estimating your tasks, this technique can also prevent you from overbooking yourself, while also making sure that you do the task that you are supposed to do, that you don't procrastinate them indefinitely, because if you put them on your calendar and you're committed to follow that, you now have a date and a time to do that task. So let's say that I don't have an already made calendar. Let's say that I'm starting from scratch, and the way that I like to do this is first to put in my calendar all the recurring events and tasks that I know that I will have to do. For example, I know that I like to start my day by checking and answering my emails, so I'm going to add that to my calendar and I'm going to set it to repeat every day. And I also allocate time each day at the end of my workday to check my emails again and wrap up the project that I'm working on, so that the next day it's easier for me to start where I left off. And something that I also do is to block my Friday mornings, because I dedicate that time to do my bookkeeping, to send any invoices I have to send for that week, to record any payments, and to do any admin work that has to do with my business but is not necessarily client related. And then once that I have the recurring task and the kind of non-negotiable things that I have to do, is when I start filling up my week with the projects that I need to do. Rather than write smaller tasks, I prefer to write the project that I'll be doing. For example, this morning I'm going to draft a bra pattern for this brand, or this afternoon I'm going to do the first design sketches for this collection, things like that. But I know that some people prefer to put each individual step, like draft the base patterns, do pattern modifications, create the pattern, check the seams, etc. So do whatever works for you. And usually I like to do all this way in advance, because that's a way for me to not overcommit myself. So whenever I commit to do a project for a brand, I put all the time that I think that it's going to take me on my calendar. Even though in the early stages of a project, all of this planning is likely to change, but at least that way I have an estimation, and also it allows myself to not overcommit to other projects. So if a client comes and asks for a project, I can look at my calendar and be able to give them a timeline to when I'll be able to make it, taking into account all the time that I already know that I'm going to be spending working on other previous projects. And because unexpected things happen, I like to have buffers in my calendar, so I like to have spaces in which I don't put anything, I leave them blank. So if it turns out that some tasks take longer than what I had expected, I have this buffer time there, so I don't need to rearrange my whole calendar to fit that and panic because I don't have the time to complete this project, whatever. And I like to color code some of the types of things that I do, but you're probably a sane person and you don't have to do this. But if you like to, feel free to just add all the colors in the universe. So now that I know what I'm going to do, thanks to my fancy calendar blocking, I'm going to start doing the things. And as we have seen, my first task is always to answer my emails. And answering my emails is something that I don't really like to do, but I have to. So to motivate myself to do that, I use a technique that is called the Pomodoro technique. And probably you have heard it like all around because it's pretty famous, but it consists in putting on a timer for 25 minutes and then having a rest for 5 minutes, and then you repeat that cycle through your work session. And once you have made 4 full Pomodoros, you have a longer break. I don't do the Pomodoro technique exactly, but what I like to do is that for tasks that I'm not super excited about doing, instead of looking at the screen with existential horror, I put a timer for 20-25 minutes and I try to beat the timer. I try to complete the task within that timer, so that way I avoid procrastinating it. So that's what I'm going to do now with my emails. And for the rest of my day, I actually continue using some sort of Pomodoro technique, but not actually like the Pomodoro Bible tells us to do that, because what I like is to work in sessions of 50 minutes. I find that that works better. The longer sessions work better for me when I'm doing tasks that require a bit more focus and concentration, like pattern making, designing, sketching, things like that. And then I have a break for around 5 minutes. And I generally avoid having longer breaks because I feel like I lose my focus and then I need a lot of time to regain it. So what I do is 50 minutes of work and then a short break, so I can like get up, stretch my legs, have some water, things like that. So even if it's not the canonical Pomodoro technique, this is something that I do use a lot, and that's also why I would encourage you to experiment with your own Pomodoro technique. Like maybe you prefer to work in shorter amounts of time or having longer breaks, or maybe you prefer to have like 60 minutes Pomodoros and then a super long break of like half an hour in between. Do whatever works for you, but I think that what I like about this technique is that it reminds you to take a break, which is one of those healthy habits that we tend to forget when we are very focused in our work. So now that my emails are out of the way, I know that according to my calendar, I should be working in a project, actually a special project that is a collaboration with other 2 designers, and I will talk about it more in future videos, hopefully. So what I'm going to do is to open the software that I use to manage my projects and my clients. And having some kind of project management system or software is something that I really recommend, so you can keep track of everything, of all the tasks you need to do to complete a project. And I also use it to keep track of things that I need to invoice or things that I need to send to the client. So the software that I use, it's called Moxie, I'm not particularly recommending it. Actually, I think the UI has a lot of room for improvement, but I just use it because I have a legacy plan that is free. I think now it's a subscription. So other free alternatives that I've seen are ClickUp, FreeCam, and Notion. And if you don't want to learn another software, you can always use a dedicated notebook and have there a log of your different projects and the tasks that you need to complete. You don't need to overcomplicate this step, but whatever your own system is, this is what I think that should be the essentials. I have a place where I can see all of my active projects at a glance, and inside of each project I have all the tasks that I need to do. And in this particular software you can create like subtasks and checklists and things like that, and I can mark each task as not started, in progress, client approval, that's when I have sent the files to the clients and I'm waiting for their feedback, and I can also mark the task as done. So this really helps me organize the projects into smaller tasks to make them feel less overwhelming, which at first, especially if you're starting freelancing, thinking about a big project is a lot. So right after I sign a contract, I usually go to my software and I divide all the different project phases and all the tasks that I will need to be doing for that project. And that way it makes me feel more accomplished, more efficient, but also it will help me a lot to keep track of all of those little things during the course of that project. And now you are thinking that the calendar blocking concept sounded really cool, but how on earth are you going to know how much time is going to take you to do a task, especially if it's something that you are not used to doing? Well, my friend, this is where the concept of time tracking comes in. If you have ever charged a project by the hour, I know that you will be familiar with time tracking, but I encourage you to use this technique even when you're not charging by the hour. To track my time, I normally use the same software that I use to manage my projects because that's a feature that is integrated in it, but I know that there are a lot of other softwares, free softwares, that can do the same. One of them that I have used in the past is called Toggle, and there's also something called Clockify, I think, that can be integrated with Notion. So you have a lot of options, and the point of time tracking in this case is not necessarily because you are going to charge hourly. It's because it can give you a lot of information about how much time do you actually spend on doing a specific task, so that next time that you have to plan for something like that, you know more or less what's your average, so you can plan accordingly and block the time on your calendar that matches your past experience. So maybe you don't need to time track always, but I encourage you to at least try, because you will discover that a lot of the tasks that you estimate in like 10 minutes, they can take you maybe 2 hours. So we tend to be very optimistic when we look at our own time and think like this is very easy, this should be very quick. But if you track that time, probably that perception will change and it will help you to plan for future projects without realizing that your planning was completely off. And maybe it can also help you to charge the correct price for your services, because even if you're not charging by the hour, your pricing probably has some correlation with the time that you spend on each task, and maybe you have priced a part of a project thinking that it will take you like 5 hours, but in reality you see that it takes you more like 10. So if you see that happening in a lot of different projects, you probably need to revisit your own pricing. I used this a lot at the beginning because I didn't have a clear idea of how much time it was going to take me to do a complete like bra pattern or design a collection, things like that. And that way, after a couple of projects, I could see that, oh, like the pattern making part takes me around this amount of time and the design part takes me this amount of time. And also, this is a bit of a personal thing, but I feel like when I'm tracking my time, when I actually click the button to start tracking, I kind of focus more, like I'm less prone to distracting myself with stuff. So even though now I don't think I need to track everything I do because I know I have a pretty good picture of how long it will take me, I like to do it anyways because I think that it helps me be more focused in the work that I'm doing. Maybe for you it doesn't happen like that, but I find that's very interesting, so let me know if for you it's the same or not. So now you've been with me for the better part of this morning, and I hope this has been interesting and ideally helpful. But to finish up this video, I would say that for me it's important to look at the concept of productivity by taking an approach that is more gentle and more sustainable. It's about doing the things that you have to do in the way that is best for you and that allows you to create the best work possible while also enjoying the time that you spend doing it. Because as freelancers, we sometimes project this image of doing our dream job, but our dream job is also a job. It can be stressful sometimes, it can be boring, you can end up being burned out, and that's why I like to put this kind of strategies in place. First, to make the experience of working, which is something that we all have to do, to make that as pleasant as possible, and also to prevent the work time to eat into my free time, because I like my job, but I also like living my life. And as a final note, I want to say that these tips are things that have worked for me, but not necessarily have to work for you. Maybe you take some ideas from this video and then adapt them to suit your own unique style of working, or maybe you try these things and you completely hate them. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have any other technique or tip that you think it can be helpful, please let me know, because I'm always looking to learn more about this. And in case you're curious and want to know a bit more about how I became a fashion designer, I made a video about that the other day, so you can watch it here. And for now, take care, don't work too much, and see you soon in the next video.